Hello guys, in this video we'll be exploring and discussing the Tevinter Imperium. We'll start with a short introduction to the basic lore, then talk about the current state of the Imperium so you know what to expect in Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and finally, at the end, I'll share a few theories regarding possible upcoming events. I have a few takes that are definitely quite different from most common ideas out there, so once you finish watching this video, I encourage you to continue the discussion down below in the comment section. Alright, without any further delays, let's talk about the Tevinter lore. Surprisingly, the history of Tevinter does not start with the first appearance of humans in Theras in -3100 Ancient. One of the territories that currently make up this nation is the Arlathan forest, located in the east. The forest is where once the ancient capital of the Elven Empire was located, and it's the Elven culture that greatly shaped the history of the Imperium and of the human race. It might also end up being one of the locations to which we'll get to travel to in the next game, but we'll discuss that idea later in the video. Up until the events of the Trespasser DLC, all races believed that the first appearance of humans caused the elves to lose their immortality. However, with Solas revealing that he's an ancient god called Fen'Harel, we find out that it was him who caused the elves to age. It was an accidental side effect of Solas creating the veil. So as humans started pouring into the continent through the north and creating the first tribes, they encountered little resistance from weakened and fearful elves. It is unclear why the Dalish elves do not know that the veil was responsible for their race's aging, but either way, they started blaming the process on the appearance of mortal humans whom they called Shemlan, the quick ones, for their short lifespans. In -1195, the Tevinter Imperium was founded. The elves kept on trying to put up a fight against humans, but they were getting pushed further and further south just to eventually become almost completely enslaved, and for their legendary city of Arlathan to be destroyed in -975. Their culture, language, and knowledge of history greatly suffered in the process. With most of Theras under the Tevinter's thumb, humans were growing fast. The country was and is ruled by mages, which makes it a magocracy. The governing body of the Imperium is the Magisterium, which consists of elite mages. At the head of the nation is the Archon. The position is normally kept within a family line, but in cases when a living Archon does not name an heir, it's the Magisterium that elects the next candidate. Archons have a final say over enacting laws, and their position is seen as coming from a divine place. When it comes to faith, the first major religion that took root in tribes that later made up the Imperium was the worship of the old gods, a set of 7 dragon deities. It began around the year -2800 Ancient, when a major human tribe called the Neromanians started hearing whispers of the old gods. Over 1,000 years later, a powerful dreamer called Talzian was contacted by the dragon Dumat and learned the secrets of blood magic. Talzian soon after established the Magisterium from the priesthood, worshipping the dragons, and rose to the rank of the first king of the Neromanians. He also created the first temples dedicated to the old gods. Religion spread fast. In -1195, High King of the Neromanians called Darinius united all tribes and created the Tevinter Imperium. Over 800 years later, the worship of the old gods almost completely died down because of the events that led to the first blight. So what happened? The high priest of Dumat was encouraged by his god to enter the Golden City, the place that supposedly used to be the creator's home. Stepping inside it would mean ascending to godhood, the ultimate goal that any powerful mage wanted to accomplish. To reach the city, the servant of Dumat had to ask the high priests of other dragon deities to help him, as alone he was not powerful enough to accomplish this goal. In -395, using the blood magic from sacrificing countless slaves, together all 7 magisters shattered the veil and reached the Golden City, destroying it with their sin and turning it black. The magisters upon arrival became corrupted and were banished back to their realm, where they became the first Darkspawn. Their presence started destroying everything around them. The land was turning black too. The Archon, who was ruling at the time, uncovered the plot as it was happening. He supposedly found the cast-out bodies of the Magisters and tried to kill them. unsuccessfully. In desperation, he called to the spirits of the fate for help and ultimately scattered the corrupted mages to the corners of the earth, then returned to Minratos to prepare his nation for the doom to come. So far, we encountered two ancient magisters in Dragon Age games, the Architect and Corypheus. The first one did not remember much of who he was or what happened to him, but according to Corypheus, who was the high priest of Dumat, the Golden City was already black when he got there. What exactly happened in the Fate is a subject for another video though. At the moment, we don't know for sure yet, but if you wanna hear some interesting lore and theories about it, make sure to subscribe so you know when I upload a new video. We'll go back to discussing the old gods a little bit later. For now, let's continue talking about the Tevinter history. As I mentioned, a doom was coming to the Imperium and all of Theras. The same year that the Golden City was blackened, the first blight started, which means that the Darkspawn carrying the blight found and corrupted an old god, turning it into an archdemon. In the case of the first blight, it was Dumat who got corrupted. The whole Theras, including Tevinter, was fighting the archdemon for almost 200 years without being able to kill it, not until the Grey Wardens discovered a ritual called the Joining that involved blood magic and drinking tainted blood in order to become a part of the Darkspawn's hive mind. The Grey Wardens became capable of hearing the god's commands and the calling. The Wardens are also the only ones who can kill the archdemon. Normally, when corrupted dragon dies, its soul travels to the closest Darkspawn, and those have no soul. If a Grey Warden deals the final blow, the soul of the archdemon becomes drawn to the warrior's corrupted body, and both of them die in the process. The reason why it works is because Grey Wardens are not Darkspawn, and despite the joining, they still possess a soul after the ritual. In -203, Dumat was finally defeated. After the blight ended, Tevinter was in chaos. The old gods stopped whispering and everybody began to question their faith. Temples were burned and priests murdered. The same year that the first blight ended, Andrasta was born into an Alamari city of Denerim as a daughter of the largest tribe's chief. 16 years later, the young girl was married to an Avar leader, Maferath. The union created a large Alamari alliance. Ever since she was a child, Andrasta dreamt of an obscure god known as the Maker. With time, the dreams provided her with a better and better understanding of the world around her. The Maker was the true powerful god who abandoned his children after they took up the worship of the old gods. According to the Chant of Light, the Maker fell in love with Andrasta and offered to remove her from the flawed world she lived in. However, Andrasta was already married and did not want to leave her life behind, so she begged the Maker to return to his people. He agreed, under the condition that the worship of the old gods would come to a complete end in Theras. He did not leave her empty-handed though, and promised to aid her crusade with his own powers. Andrasta's cult was gaining a lot of popularity fast. Southern parts of Tevinter were heavily oppressed, and the first blight turned the people against the worship of the old gods. Victims were looking for different answers and collectively started joining Andrasta's side. Her army, like a raging wildfire, started marching towards Minratos. On the way, she even created an alliance with the elves, led by a former slave called Shartan. In -171, she defeated Tevinter in the largest battle yet, in the Valarian's fields, and was ready to march on Minratos. Unfortunately, that's when a tragedy happened. Her husband grew jealous of Andrasta's accomplishments and her relationship with the Maker. Following the battle outside of the capital, he made a secret pact with the Archon of the Imperium called Hesarian. In exchange for Andrasta's capture, they would sign a truce, ending the war. The bride of the Maker was kidnapped and burned in Minratos in front of a crowd. Shartan, her loyal champion, died in an attempt to free her. Archon Hesarian, who ordered to burn Andrasta, in the last moment took pity on her, struck her with a sword and ended her life to stop the suffering. Supposedly he did it because the Maker spoke to him. Nobody knows whether Hesarian's change of heart was genuine or whether he realized that he could not fight the influence of the new cult. Soon after the events in Minratos, Maferath dispersed the conquered lands to his 3 sons, who played a role in establishing Orlais, Nevara, and Free Marches, and himself returned to Ferelden. 10 years after Andrasta's death, Hesarion, who had a change of heart, converted Tevinter to Andrastianism. He also revealed that the prophet's husband was the one who conspired against her. Maferath was murdered by his own sons. In the meanwhile, in Tevinter, the Archon ended up killing the high priests of the old gods who were refusing to give up their faith. With the aid of the non-mage Soporati class, he managed to establish the new religion in Tevinter. Interestingly, the temples for the old gods were not destroyed, but repurposed and became the first circus of magi. Keep that in mind because we'll come back to this important detail later on when we discuss some theories. With the chant of light gaining popularity among nations, you can imagine that naturally each one of them tried to use their religion's popularity to represent their own private interests. And so in 1-1 Divine, Orlais Emperor Cordillus Dracon appointed Justinia I as the first divine and the head of the Orlesian Chantry. Tevinter was obviously greatly upset about Orlais trying to push their authority over the Imperium and over the whole religion, arguing that their involvement with Andrastianism has already a longer history than their neighbors, and that Tevinter is the holy land where the prophet lived and died. The Orlesian Chantry, on the other hand, was arguing that Tevinter's grand clerics are male, and their gender was seen as unfit due to Maferath's betrayal. There were many disagreements between Tevinter and Orlais, but the greatest of them all was over the second verse of Cantic of Transfigurations in the Chant of Light that says, "Magic exists to serve man, never to rule over him." In a nation that took pride in breeding strong mages and where mages were a part of the government, this verse was vastly different than in the south. In Tevinter, it states that magic best served man by ruling over him. Eventually, the Orlesian divine named the clerics of Tevinter heretics, which in 387 towers resulted in a creation of the Imperial Chantry, with the first Imperial divine being a man appointed by the Archon. To this day, there are 2 separate chantries and 2 vastly different interpretations of what role should magic play in the lives of people. With Solas being once again another powerful mage threatening to destroy Theras, certainly the Orlesian Chantry will interpret it as another evidence for why mages should be kept on short leashes. At the end of Dragon Age Inquisition, players get to decide whether Leliana, Vivienne, or Cassandra should become the next divine. I will only briefly talk about choosing Leliana as the next divine because she's the one who is considered the most liberal, almost heretical. She believes that all the mages should be free. She wants to better the position of the elves and make sure that the Chantry serves all its children equally. Her take on the position of mages is closest to the beliefs of the Imperial Chantry, and it will certainly be interesting to see how our choices will shape the next game. A big part of Dragon Age Dreadwolf is going to be the Qunari occupation, so their previous conquest is something we definitely should talk about in this video. Theras was first attacked by the Qunari in 630 still, so quite recently. The origin of this race is unclear. We know that they have something to do with a raid called the Kosif, but the lead writer David Gaider clearly states that when it comes to describing the Horned race, we are to refer to them as the Qunari. While the Kosif mysteriously disappeared, the Qunari gained enough power to conquer new lands. In an encounter between a Qunari inquisitor and Corypheus, the Magister cryptically stated that their race was a mistake, suggesting that Qunari were most likely an artificial creation.
What do they call you? A Qunari? Your blood is engorged with decay. Your race is not a race. It is a mistake.
In Steel Age, the Qun threatened most of Theras. They first claimed Parvolan, which they occupy up to this day. The island was never taken back, and from there the Horned race would launch their operations. The war between the Qun and continental Theras lasted until every nation except for Tevinter signed the Lomerine Accords in 784 Storm. So, practically speaking, Tevinter never ended the wars with the Qunari, but their conflict was mostly limited to fights in Seheron. At the end of the Trespasser DLC, so in in 944 Dragon, we find out that the priesthood of the Qun was launching another operation called Dragon's Breath. They attempted to assassinate leaders of the south before starting a new invasion. Solas and the Inquisitors stopped that attempt. In the book Dragon Age Tevinter Nights, we find out that not long after the events of the Trespasser DLC, the military branch of the Qun launched an unsanctioned, by other branches of the Q, new attack on continental Tevinter. In addition to that, in the short story As We Fly, we find out the invasion reached Antiva, and the city of Treviso is under the Qunari occupation. So the state of Tevinter in Dragon Age Dreadwolf will be rough. Once a powerful nation, the Imperium now has a very bad reputation. They are seen as conquerors, slavers, heretics, and the Magisters are held responsible for starting the blights. The only race that Tevinter has a good relationship with is the dwarves. It's self-explanatory why mages of Tevinter rely on trade with Orzammar, because they are heavily dependent on lyrium supplies. From talking with Dorian, we can get the impression that the Imperium is almost unaware of how they are perceived outside of their borders. They see the rest of Theras as barely civilized savages. Looking at the newly released concept art, you can almost understand why. Minratos has this cyberpunk-like look, which is a great contrast to, for example, medieval-looking hinterlands. In Tevinter, magic was used to build and maintain marvelous structures, and the mages never shied away from using slaves to perform questionable research, contrary to the Orlesian Chantry that held the use and research of magic back, for better or worse. There's a region of the Imperium that deserves its own video, but either way I have to briefly mention it here. It's the Arlathan forest. It's never been fully confirmed yet that we'll get to go to that location in Dragon Age Dreadwolf, but there is concept art suggesting that we'll travel to some kind of forest. Furthermore, a lot of stories released after Dragon Age Inquisition take us there, so it only makes sense for us to experience it in the next game. A couple days ago, while preparing this video, I ended up browsing the Dragon Age Dreadwolf website in search of some possible clues I'd missed, and I decided to save the website to a folder. Among the website files, I found something very interesting, which resulted in me making this quick video. I should probably further elaborate on my findings here, since the map I found is tied to the Tevinter lore. So the website for Dragon Age Dreadwolf game used a blackened piece of the map that we already saw in the book Tevinter Nights. The black and trimmed version of the map is a part of the website's design, and it shows various locations, but not all locations from the original map. You can see Weishaupt, Antiva City, Minratos, and the Arlathan Forest. Two of these places are confirmed locations for the next game. One of them is a strong maybe, and it's Antiva City. This video is not about Antiva, so I don't want to stray away and explain why it's a strong maybe. If you're curious, I discussed it with someone in the comments section of my previous upload. Antiva aside, if the map shows future in-game locations, we might end up traveling to the Arlathan Forest. In the comics, Dragon Age The Missing, Varric and Harding travel to the forest in search of an artifact that supposedly has the power to bring Tevinter to its knees. They are racing Solas and the Imperial Venatori cult to be the first ones to retrieve it. In their travels, they meet a group called the Veil Jumpers, who help them navigate the place. Ultimately, the artifact was snatched by Solas and the dwarves leave empty-handed. The comic's story also clearly shows that Solas is actively fighting the cult, probably because of their views on slavery and the elves. Anyway, Arlathan in The Missing, for some reason, is in complete chaos. The time does not work, roads float in the air, wildlife has gone mad, and spirits exchange place with the living. My speculation is that destruction of Arlathan using blood magic thinned the veil in this area. We know that's what happens for sure in places where many people die. There are other examples of areas where the veil got thinned too. For one, blood magic is how the Magisters cracked the veil and assaulted the Golden City. Then, in Kirkwall, when the city was occupied by Tevinter, the mages used slave sacrifices to do research and possibly contact demons in pursuit of secret ancient knowledge. the sacrifices led to the thinning of the veil, which was a subject of an investigation by the Band of Three affiliated with the Seekers. Lastly, another good example is when in Dragon Age Inquisition we travel to the Exalted Plains. Solas remarks, "Great battles thin the veil. This region will be home to demons for ages to come." So with a great tragedy having happened in the Arlathan forest, it may be why the veil is thinned, causing the physics to be different in that region. In many ways, the forest simply looks like the crossroads from the Trespasser DLC. Having given it some thought, I realized that from the perspective of game developers, they might want to show players, especially those who are new to the franchise, what it would mean if Solas succeeded in tearing down the veil. Instead of using words and explaining complicated lore to draw a picture of that idea, they can just send the players to the chaotic parts of the Arlathan forest. Despite the missing not having been received as well as other comics, ultimately it confirmed that the figures we've seen in previous concept art pieces and trailers are the Veil Jumpers, because their uniforms match. The group is not overly exclusive and every race is free to join. They also helped Varric in his search for the artifact that the Inquisition was seeking, so naturally they might end up becoming our allies in Dragon Age Dreadwolf. Okay, I think it's time we talk about some theories tied to the Tevinter lore. Through teasers and trailers over the last couple years, we found out various connections between the Old Gods and the Evanuris. In 2018, the following image was released. It most likely shows that the veil is held by 2 more locks and 5 have already been destroyed. There are 7 Old Gods, 5 blights already happened and ended in the defeat of 5 archdemons, which means that the veil might be held by 2 more Old Gods. Does it mean that if all archdemons were defeated, perhaps the veil would be weakened or torn down? It is possible, and it would certainly explain why Solas in Dragon Age Inquisition was outraged by the idea of the Wardens locating and slaying the 2 remaining Old Gods to prevent more blights from happening.
We must stop the Wardens from carrying out this insane plan, Inquisitor. To seek out these old gods deliberately in some bizarre attempt to preempt the blight.
They won't succeed. We're going to stop them together.
Thank you. I've been on my own for so long. It's difficult to get used to having the support of others. Those fools and duty. Responsibility is not expertise. Action is not inherently superior to inaction. Forgive me. The entire idea is unnerving.
Then in 2022, a trailer revealed this piece of information.
I knew him as Solas, a thoughtful mage obsessed with dreams. But long ago, he had a different name. Fen Harel, the Dreadwolf. Ancient elven god of lies, or heroic rebel against tyranny, depending on which story you believe. In his final fight with the elven gods, Solas imprisoned them and created a veil that split our world from the raw magic of the Fade. But now, he wanted to tear down that veil and destroy the world. And we're the only ones who can stop him.
By combining both images, we can deduce that these 2 gods are still dormant. And their symbols match the 2 figures from a mural that we first saw in an official trailer back in 2020.
I've faced tyrants and would-be gods. Seen friends lose life and limb. But there's always someone bent on breaking the world.
Now, while I think that deeper analysis of these findings should be reserved for another time, I have to certainly point out that in my opinion the mural depicts future events that might end up taking place in Tevinter. Why? Well, let's shortly discuss every element of the mural one by one, and this theory will start making a lot of sense.
We've got your back.
On the bottom left, there's a silhouette of Meredith. Her body is red, and you can see veins running across it. For those of you who played Dragon Age 2, this appearance might come as a surprise because after all, we have already defeated her, right? Turns out that no. In 2022, BioWare released an animated series called Dragon Age Absolution. The very last scene of the series shows that Meredith survived the fight against Hawk. She's still alive, trapped in the form of a large red lyrium crystal located somewhere in Kirkwall. Meredith's name is now the Crimson Knight, and her existence is driven by a desire to wage war against the Venatori cult and the Tevinter Imperium. On the opposite side of this mural, you can see Corypheus. Once again, you'd think that Corypheus is dead and defeated, just how Meredith was. But what did the Inquisitors say when they were dealing the final blow?
You wanted into the Fade?
So the old Tevinter Magister, the High Priest of Dumat, is not dead but trapped in the Fade, and his comeback and even a minor role in the game is very possible. What do we see in the very center of the mural? So it's obviously Fen'Harel coming down to attack a city. It seems that people speculate that this must be the Black City. Ultimately, we'll not know for sure until we get more information, but let me throw a different new theory at you. In my opinion, Soras in this mural is coming to Tevinter, and more specifically to the oldest circle that is located in Minratos, the capital of the Imperium. What's really interesting is that this specific circle used to be a temple of Razikale, the old goddess that has yet to be awakened, and that is most likely the figure you see on the top left side. Just so you don't blindly believe my words, here's what the Black City looks like, and that's the Circle of Magi in Minratos. The architectural style of the buildings in Tevinter is much more similar to what we see in Solas' painting. Not just that, do you see how whatever this floating structure is floats over other buildings? In the Fade, the Black City floats far away from everything. So how come so many people assume that what we see must be what used to be the Golden City? Well, it looks like it's corrupted and covered in red lyrium. Red lyrium is blighted lyrium, and blight is what supposedly corrupted the house of the Maker and turned it black. In addition, we know that Dalish elves believe that the Evanuris were tricked and trapped by Fen'Harel in a location they call the Eternal City. However, trailers and even gameplay leaks indicate that the red lyrium is spreading everywhere, and Tevinter is not safe from that corruption. In Dragon Age Inquisition, when we visit the Storm Coast, one of the missions is stopping the Venatori from smuggling corrupted lyrium to their homeland, where they wanted to turn slaves into an unstoppable force. That's why, in my opinion, the building on the mural looks like it's corrupted because extremist magisters will most likely turn to the use of the red lyrium. Furthermore, the Archon resides in that specific circle, so it would make sense for the trickster god who hates slavery to launch an attack to that location. What I propose is that the painting represents two alliances we might be choosing from in the next game, just as we had to do it in Dragon Age Inquisition when we had to pick between the Templars and the Mages. On one hand, we could side with Meredith, who represent the Templars. According to the animated series I mentioned before, she's trying to retrieve an artifact called Circulum Infinitus that is capable of bringing people back to life by performing a ritual that uses the blood of a close relative. It is unclear how Meredith would use it though. I doubt it would be to restore her body because her relatives died in a tragedy that I explained in a recently uploaded YouTube short and on Instagram. I'm linking both uploads down below in the comment section for you. Her story is actually extremely interesting and saddening, so I recommend checking it out because it might bring you a certain level of empathy towards this antagonist. Anyway, according to her, the artifact is what would allow her to turn the Templars, including the Imperial Templars, against Tevinter, and even against the Venatori who are about to once again completely abuse the slaves to restore the nation's power. By helping her with her crusade against Tevinter, would also gain a Templar ally in trying to stop Solas. On the other hand, Corypheus might be somewhere in the Fate, and we could seek his alliance as well. He's a mage, he's difficult to kill, possesses immense knowledge on Terra's history, and on top of that, in Dragon Age Inquisition, he was supporting the Venatori. The cult is the polar opposite version of an ally when compared to the Templars. They're interested in fighting the Qunari, and as a matter of fact, they're heavily involved in defending Seheron. Their magic might come in handy against Solas as well. In my video about Antiva, I theorized that while we explore the nation, which is currently under the Qunari occupation, we might have to face a similar choice of whether or not we want to side with or against the Qunari. Meredith's plans definitely align with the dragon-like race. She's against magic, just like they are. She also hates Tevinter, just like they do. Naturally, Venatori nationalists feel differently and would not agree to cooperate with the Qun. What about Corypheus? Well, as a Tevinter magister, he definitely opposes the race. Historically, Tevinter has been at war with the Qunari since the Steel Age, so for over 200 years now, and on top of that, Corypheus was the leader of the Venatori in Dragon Age Inquisition and was revered by them. Hopefully, you started seeing a pattern of possible storylines and alliances in the next game. I'm going to be crazy excited if any of my guesses end up being accurate, because we really have very little to work with until the full reveal this summer promised by BioWare. Going back to the mural, the reason why Fen'Harel is depicted as possibly assaulting Minratos might have to do with the circle in there. Perhaps there's an artifact in the old temple of Razikele that he needs to retrieve, or perhaps the depiction is symbolic in nature and it's just supposed to show that Fen'Harel's goal once again is to free the elven slaves by going after the abusers. The Imperium, after all, is known for acceptance towards slavery, and the elves are definitely the race that suffers the most. The last pieces of the mural we should discuss are the two figures on the top right and the top left. At the moment, people are speculating which elven gods are tied to which old gods. So in my opinion, on the right, you are most likely looking at Elgar'nan. He is speculated to be the figure who speaks about ruling the world at the end of the Dragon Age Day trailer from 2023.
All the world will soon share the peace and comfort of my reign.
Elgar'nan was the All-Father of the Elven Pantheon, so it only makes sense for the most important of the remaining Evanuris to claim such a powerful role. I also found some evidence about his appearance in Weishaupt in my trailer analysis. Once again, links will be down below. If it's not Elgar'nan, the next best option is Falon Din, but in my videos I will place my bets on the All-Father because in my opinion it would just be more fitting. When it comes to the old god Lusakhan, he currently still has a large following in Tevinter. Couple years ago, BioWare created a tabletop pen and paper role-playing game that not many people are aware of. A part of the story within the game is Lusakhan's cult called the Last Moon. We might end up learning more about them in Dragon Age Dreadwolf, though probably more through codex entries, as it would not make sense to overcomplicate the story, especially for people who are new to the franchise. The goddess on the left might either be Andruil or Gila-9. Personally, I'm leaning more towards Razikele being Gila-9 because she was responsible for the creation of giant monsters and beasts. This concept art suggests we might be facing one of her potential creations, assuming it's not her. But just so you understand why it is speculated that it could be Andruil, let's take a look at this codex entry. There's a brief image of an elaborate golden spear, glowing with unbearable heat. Then it fades. The monster is holding a spear that matches the description. However, to that, I say that Andruil and Gila-9 were lovers, so it would not be impossible for such a spear to end up in Gila-9's hands. Finally, I'm sure some of you might wonder whether Dorian is going to make a significant appearance in Dragon Age Dreadwolf. In my opinion, he is, especially considering that the artifact Circulum Infinitus was crafted by Amelia Pavus, so most likely a family member of his. In Trespasser DLC, we learned that Dorian assumed his seat in the Magisterium, which again is located in the Circle in Minratos, so our paths with him will definitely cross one way or another, because we know for sure that the new protagonist will have to travel to the Imperial capital. From Tevinter Nights, we learned that Dorian is heavily involved in fighting the Venatori and ends up creating a small faction in the Magisterium whose primary role is exactly that, preventing the cult from gaining power. He also hopes to redeem his country and fix its bad reputation. Okay, so while I would love to continue this video, I think it's long enough already. I'm very curious to learn your opinions on my theories. The next video will be about the Black City and views on the Maker. I'm going to try to prove to you how different interpretations of different races perhaps do not all contradict each other and they are just one story told from different angles. Anyway, thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'm going to leave you a bunch of useful links in the comments section down below and in the video's description. If you like my content, please make sure to support the channel by liking and subscribing. Take care.